Many rewarding moments are about the unsung successes when you successfully save lives. I'm Assaf Orion, a retired and reserved military officer in the IDF, brigadier general. I spent 32 years of my life in the IDF, 20 of them in the intelligence community, and like 10 in strategic planning. I'm here at the Washington Institute as a visiting military fellow. Negotiation and communication are not the other side, the contrast of warfare and using force. Actually, warfare is much about communication. Some of this you say verbally in declaration and statements. Some of them is actually modulated on missiles for them to understand what you mean. So sitting across people who are not necessarily your friends, but they're partners in fighting sometimes, like you fight against them or you want not to fight against them. What I saw in the last, we all saw in the last months in Gaza, that Israel and Hamas are not really talking directly to each other, but through a third party. So you need to understand the other side. You need to understand what they insist on. You need to understand their flexibility. And this is happening in a security environment, in a security context. So understanding your side and standing staunchly on the most significant issues, finding the flexibilities you understand you can in order to create trust or create momentum and so on. And run all this logic thinking through the other guy's side, so to make this worthwhile. On how to try to make ends meet in the impossible situation in Gaza, where 2 million people are living in very tough conditions. Some of it I would say most of it because of the choices of their own government. So Hamas is actually choosing where to put the money, to take it into arms, to dedicate so much to fighting Israel, and then Israel has to protect itself. So our own pressures are part of the equation. So when you look at this situation, you could say, okay, communication is key. Both of those parties wouldn't like to address each other directly. So somebody in the middle is very crucial. Egypt is both geographically and strategically well positioned to run this role. And it's interesting to see that it's done it both under Mubarak and under Morsi. Under Morsi and under Sisi. So under old regime, under Muslim Brother government, and under the Sisi regime. So Egypt can play a very positive role there, making sure that the communication is ongoing, making sure that both parties are trying to accommodate each other to a common understanding. It's a pretty, I would say, low common denominator. We're not talking about peace. We're not talking about finality of anything. It won't be a permanent arrangement for anything. But we can decide together to take a step back on the security side, so more people are alive when the sun finally shines, to take confidence-building measures like opening some of the crossings or facilitating the Qatari funding. So this work of working on the security conducts, working on the economic side, making sure that relief money doesn't flow into the military system of Hamas and being turned again against Israel, That's a fine art. It takes a lot of time. It's very difficult to rush. It's not by mistake that it took so many months. And to both parties' merit, I would say, is that we managed to avoid full-scale war, although it was burning, slow burning throughout the period. So that's something very, very positive. The more it's well understood in the region that Israel is there to stay, the shorter the road will be to start accommodating and coexisting. It will never be easy, it will never be simple, but the potential is great, and these are humans, so they get accustomed to things. And then we need to go to the inevitable situation in which the Middle Eastern realities are like a London bus. What people will do with you on the lower deck, they will never be ready to do with you on the upper deck. So the lower deck is teeming with security and other cooperation, really deep partnership people won't believe. And on the upper deck, you see either denials, let's say inconvenience of being seen together in public, and very dear and rare, but we now see more of them, manifestation of actually opening up to the option. But the key from the lower deck to the upper deck to going fully public on what we have, one is about the Palestinian, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, so they need to see some progress there. And the second is the question of how much they're ready to educate their publics to change the generations-old positions toward Jews and Israelis. And that's a long haul. But since they are not leaving the region, and neither do we have all the time that's needed to work on this. There's only one question of Iran's forward army threatening Israel. But the basic condition is that people will be interested in this at least as Iran is. So as long as they're more committed to the cause than others are committed to stopping them, it'll be difficult to win. Much of their system has been built on the fact that the cost is very low for them. They don't pay much. It costs them some money, and the blood is paid by proxies and their enemies, so it's good to go. No cost to Iran, it's a successful strategy, why don't we go on? In my understanding, the key to actually beating them down or unhinging their system is to take out the component which is the enabler of all this system, which generates the proxies and regenerates them after war. And that's parts of the Quds force who are dedicated to building proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, all the militias that we see in Syria coming from Afghanistan, Pakistan, you know, whatever they have, Iraqis. It's like the wizard's apprentice. The minute you take out the spell, all those broomlets will fall to the ground and stop fighting you. So I think they need to be, since it's a system, it has a system logic, you can disrupt the logic by taking the main component out. And this needs to be done politically, diplomatically, economically, with intelligence and with some kinetics. It's not a world war, but it should be addressed. For the sake of proportions, the Israeli strategic and security situation these days is among the best it had been. So yes, the soup of the day is always, oh, look, there is a tunnel here, oh, there's a demonstration there. Something happened in Syria. It's true, but these are just the details. When you zoom out and you look what have we've been through since our War of Independence until today, there is no serious military organization, nation-state army on our borders, no maneuvering threat to us. Egypt and Jordan are at peace with us. Most of the region does not see us as an enemy, although it has some issues with us. And yes, we have Iran, its proxies, and we have the serious issue to settle with the Palestinians, who are not going away, and neither do we. So when you ask, how do you balance it? You need not to outspend yourself into collapse, because you can easily spin your economy out of control and balance if you put too much into defense. I think we found an interesting and balancing act of preparing for wars, trying to avoid them as much as possible, trying to run them as short as possible. That's been more difficult recently, and to hold them at the best advantage that we can. Now, this is epitomized in this concept of the campaign between the wars, which is it's a bit misleading name, because this is your ongoing campaigning, and sometimes it drops into a war. But the ongoing effort is to make the enemies deterred, not wanting to attack you, or wanting but dissuaded from attacking you. You want them as weak as possible militarily, so you disrupt their build-up in a good sense. You build your own. And beside military and economy, which is a very important combination, we find ourselves much more robust with relations across the region and across the world. So although we have this ethos that we stand alone and we'll fight our own fights, and nobody is expected to shed its blood or his blood or her blood in defense of Israel, we are definitely not standing alone, because we stand and behind us is the U.S. and many friends and many neighbors who actually see eye to eye with us. So I think it's a comprehensive act. You do the urgent first. At the same time, you build for the future. You don't rush things. You don't rush to escalation if you don't need to. You combine communication, negotiation, military, economic, foreign, all sorts of efforts of the government. And with a little help from our friends, it's working quite beautifully. It's not a totally clear sky, but it's a spring day. You can't say it's winter is coming. It's okay.